Imagine a world where a single button could destroy millions of lives. A world where two countries prepared every day for the end of civilization. After World War II, humanity hoped for peace, but instead of peace, a new confrontation began. It had no battlefields, no official declaration of war, but the fear was real. This was the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union became the two superpowers of the world. They fought for influence, ideology, and the future of humanity. Capitalism versus communism. NATO versus the Warsaw Pact. And although there was no direct war between them, humanity came within seconds of nuclear apocalypse several times. In 1945, World War II ended. Europe lay in ruins. Millions of people were dead. But that was exactly when a new global conflict began. The United States became the strongest economy in the world, while the Soviet Union gained enormous influence in Eastern Europe. The Soviet army remained in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and East Germany. In these countries, Moscow began establishing communist regimes. The West was shocked. Former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill delivered his famous phrase, "An iron curtain has descended across Europe." And so, the world split into two camps. The United States decided to stop the spread of communism. In 1947, President Harry Truman announced a new policy, supporting any country threatened by communism. This became known as the Truman Doctrine. At the same time, America launched the Marshall Plan, a massive program to rebuild Europe. The United States invested billions of dollars into rebuilding cities, factories, and economies. The Soviet Union called it an attempt to buy influence in Europe and banned Eastern Bloc countries from participating. Berlin became the greatest symbol of the Cold War. Although the city was located deep inside Soviet-controlled territory, it was divided between the Allies. In 1948, the Soviet Union blocked all roads leading to West Berlin. Moscow hoped the people of the city would surrender without food or fuel supplies. But the United States launched an unprecedented operation, the Berlin Airlift. American planes delivered food, medicine, and coal every single day. After nearly a year, the Soviet Union was forced to back down. In 1949, the United States and its allies created NATO. The alliance had one simple principle: an attack on one member would be considered an attack on all. In response, the Soviet Union created the Warsaw Pact. The world was now fully divided into two hostile camps. The most terrifying part of the Cold War was the nuclear arms race. The United States created the first atomic bomb. But by 1949, the Soviet Union had developed nuclear weapons as well. Soon, both countries created hydrogen bombs, hundreds of times more powerful than atomic bombs. People lived in constant fear. In schools, children were taught to hide under desks in case of a nuclear attack. Bunkers were built across both America and the Soviet Union. Military leaders prepared plans for full-scale nuclear war. A new principle emerged: mutually assured destruction. If one side attacked, the other would destroy it in return. That meant there would be no winners in a nuclear war. Although the United States and the Soviet Union rarely fought directly, they supported conflicts all around the world. One of the first major conflicts was the Korean War. In 1950, Communist North Korea invaded South Korea. The United States supported South Korea. The Soviet Union and China supported the North. Millions of people died, yet the country remained divided. Then came the Vietnam War. The United States feared communism would spread across Asia. America entered a brutal war that lasted for years. Jungles, bombings, thousands of dead soldiers, and millions of civilian casualties. But despite its enormous military power, the United States failed to win. Space became the next battlefield. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched the world's first artificial satellite, Sputnik 1. America was shocked. If the Soviet Union could launch satellites into space, it could also launch nuclear missiles across continents. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. For the Soviet Union, it was a massive victory. But the United States refused to lose. President John F. Kennedy promised America would land a man on the moon. And in 1969, it happened. American astronauts landed on the lunar surface. The entire world watched live on television. But the most dangerous moment of the Cold War came in October 1962. American intelligence discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, only minutes away from U.S. territory. President John F. Kennedy ordered a naval blockade around the island. Soviet ships continued moving toward Cuba. The American military was ready to open fire. The world froze, waiting for World War III. People stocked food and prepared for nuclear war. It seemed catastrophe was unavoidable. But at the very last moment, both sides reached an agreement. The Soviet Union agreed to remove the missiles from Cuba. In return, the United States promised not to invade the island. The world had been saved. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union began to weaken. Its economy could no longer sustain the arms race. People increasingly demanded freedom and change. Mass protests spread across Eastern Europe. And in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, the ultimate symbol of a divided world. Thousands of people celebrated in the streets. For many, it marked the end of the Cold War. 2 years later, the Soviet Union officially collapsed. The United States remained the world's only superpower. But the consequences of the Cold War are still felt today. The Cold War lasted nearly half a century. It changed politics, science, space exploration, and the lives of millions. The world came dangerously close to nuclear destruction several times. And the history of the Cold War reminds us of one important truth. The most dangerous wars are not always the ones where bullets are fired.